for truth.
Welcome to Duality Check, the podcast where two brothers embark on a journey through the realms of scientific inquiry, the mysteries of the past, and the uncharted frontiers of spirituality. Join us as we explore the wonders of our world and beyond, all while embracing the roles of curious bystanders rather than experts. Together we'll unravel the tapestry of existence, blending the dichotomies of knowledge and wonder. Get ready to question, ponder, and delve into the dualities that shape our understanding of reality on Duality Check. I'm Drew.
And I'm Dean, and that was a good save.
Thanks. I kept going. I just pushed through it. I tripped myself up and then I laughed, but...
Welcome to episode 35. So we're going to do another Secret History of the World episode.
Yep.
And I've got a couple of other topics I'd like to talk about before we get into that.
Okay. Yeah, we don't have much correspondence. I guess we start, like and subscribe on YouTube. If you get through this and you like it, give us a like, follow, subscribe on YouTube or Rumble.
Comment on what you think of the episode.
Yeah, let us know what you think of this or previous episodes. We kind of have a thing going where people comment on any of the videos about any of the videos.
Yeah.
So you can keep that up too if you want to comment on this video about an episode 5 weeks ago.
Yeah, that works too.
But yeah, you can follow us on Instagram or Facebook to get the updates when the podcast episodes go live. Check out email us if you don't want to comment or anything, you want to be more private, maybe email us at host@dualitycheck.net. Check out our website at dualitycheck.net. We've got everything up there, all the pictures and videos we reference, pretty much all the links. Mm-hmm. All the episodes are, you can stream them from the website. So, yeah. Get that Sweet. Plugs out the way. What do you got if you want to start?
So, first things first, the video we played a little bit of last time about the guy talking about UFOs?
Yeah.
Well, I listened to the rest of that one on the way home.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like we should play more of it and talk about it.
All right.
Because it's...
the Colonel Karl Nell.
Yes.
That's right.
His
at the SALT conference, SALT I Connections in New York.
He makes some really interesting points that I think are worth discussing.
All right.
So let's we'll pause it after each question and have a little discussion here.
Carl, what you're saying is extremely consequential, and you've referenced other people that have said the same thing that also have similar credibility. There's similar reasons for why we should believe many of these folks, yet the government itself has not formally disclosed. They've been very reluctant to do that. Why? Why do you think that is?
So there's 6 basic reasons, and this, again, you could draw this out from first principles. There's a national security reason. There's the lack of a plan. There's the potential for societal disruption. There's the possibility that there's some non-public agreement. There's the potential for misdeeds and the desire to cover up misdeeds. And there's just the basic organizational intransigence and lack of priority that might be associated with the topic. So all these things are factors. The issue is that really the national security issue subsumes all the others. And so there's an opportunity maybe to contract the national security issue similarly to what was done with nuclear weapons and nuclear energy, such that nuclear energy is not necessarily classified and is available to the public. But lack of a plan and the potential for societal disruption are key ingredients that would prevent any responsible leader from coming forward with information that they don't have the means to address in a responsible way. It would be irresponsible to do that.
Okay, so what you're saying is that you have
Yeah, I was going to say, it's good time to pause that. So yeah, that was pretty concise and very well said as far as like what the issues are.
Yeah,
as far as confronting this head on as a
national
society.
Security, lack of a plan. Lack of a plan is interesting because that one frustrates me, but I could see why it would be a reason if you're some government spook with this information. Like, how can we come out with this information and people are going to ask us, what are we going to do about it? And we can't just come back with, you know.
Right. I mean, you'd assume if we've had contact since Roswell, or even before that, and some people like even Grush has said even before that there's been contact, that you would assume they would have some sort of plan if in fact, like he mentioned, there being some sort of non-public deal being
right. That was another one of the reasons
behind the scenes, as like, hey, we're making contact with you, but don't tell anybody else.
Right.
You know, and maybe that's just, I mean, if that's it, that's probably all that it would take. I mean, if they have the type of technology we're describing, then what do you do, right? When you make contact and they straight up say, hey, listen, you know, it's been a great conversation. Thanks for having us. But if you tell anybody,
or like how there's been rumors from other sources where they'll say that there was a deal, and the deal was essentially in exchange for technology that we essentially approved for them to operate out of certain areas, and maybe even granted them the ability to do certain limited numbers of abductions and experiments on humans.
As if they would need it, but...
Right, but...
If we're doing some sort of...
If you open up a dialogue,
then it would make
you would
sense.
think that issue might come up, right? And there might be a request to stop doing that, at least if they have any regard whatsoever for the citizenry, which, you know, maybe they don't. But I could imagine that being like a, hey, is this you guys doing this stuff? We don't really like that. And then, you know, in exchange for, you know, looking the other way,
we got technology,
right,
or some sort of... Yeah, I mean, it's just hard for me to believe, if that's the case, that we wouldn't have so many more whistleblowers, deathbed confessions, and, you know, like so many. I mean, we do have some, but the thing is that they've been so effective. And by they, I mean whoever it is that is in charge of this whole thing, right?
Yeah. The problem with
if they have that, like, all they would need is to just put too much out there, too much false information out there to make any of this like so incredible that people don't believe it or won't believe it. Put out sci-fi movies and you know, use like subliminal, like super hard to trace, you know, propaganda through media and all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Let's play a little more here.
Absolute conviction that a higher form of non-human intelligence has visited this planet, that there are factions within our own government that know about this, yet we still don't have a plan, and they may represent a security issue. This may pose a threat to humans, yet you still believe that we should disclose. Is that right?
Correct, right. So there's really three reasons that trump all those others. And those others are basically valid, like I said. So the first issue is the moral right. The government exists for and by the people. And so the nature of reality is fundamentally not government information. People have a right to know the world in which we live, and the pursuit of happiness requires that knowledge. So that's sort of the first kind of overarching philosophical foundation for this. But, you know, as a corollary to that, if there are misdeeds that were done, then they need to be remediated. If there's lack of proper oversight, which is suggested by some of the whistleblowers, that needs to be remediated. So the first issue is the moral issue. The second issue is being in a reactive mode is never preferable to being in a proactive mode. So reactive mode is basically trying to prevent disclosure. But failing that, you might get a situation where you have catastrophic disclosure that creates all the problems that you were trying to prevent. So a more balanced middle path of controlled disclosure is the best way to do this, which is again an argument for some amount of disclosure. And the third part is simply societal advance and global competitiveness. More brain trust needs to be brought into this topic in order to make progress and to improve society. And so all three of those things together trump the 6 other reasons for non-disclosure.
And
Yeah.
I
That's
agree with all those points.
yeah, that's very well said.
Yeah. And that's, like with more and more people coming out, he's talking about this controlled disclosure. And honestly, what we've been seeing over the last, since the 2017 New York Times article had kind of reads to me like a controlled disclosure anyway. Like a lot of these people have to actually talk to the government and get approval before they come out, even as much as they do, like Grush.
Yeah, the only problem I see with this controlled disclosure is it being properly disclosed?
Right.
Even though it is like they say controlled, but is it really a controlled disclosure if different ideologies of what it is are coming out of the same entity, right? So you've got people within the government coming out having completely different ideas of what this thing is.
I mean,
and
that
are giving
could
different
be
vibes of what are we worried? Are we not worried? Like, you know,
that could be like a footprint or evidence of the sort of compartmentalization.
It could be, yeah. But that's, again, to the point of it's not really controlled then. Because if it's compartmentalized and they're coming out in different compartments and they have competing evidence or competing
Well, maybe that's part of how it's controlled is by having it be competing ideas. Then at least there's more and more people coming out that are giving credible testimony. So at least the base idea is ranking up in
so you think
its credibility.
So you think that having multiple outlets as to what this means is a way of controlling it? Because otherwise, if you have one narrative, it's easier to skew it to whatever their need is or whatever their want is, instead of having multiple ideas. And then the disclosure is out. Like we eventually get to the point where we admit it, but it's who are they? What are they? What do they need? What do they want? All these things are going to be different. There's not going to be one like.
Yeah,
congruent story as to what it is.
Right.
Still.
What I mean by having conflicting narratives being part of the control is that if the baseline of what's in common between those narratives is that we're being visited, that there's craft here, but all the interpretations beyond that are conflicting, then you're disclosing that we're being visited. You're disclosing, that this is technology we didn't create. But by having conflicting information, you're kind of preventing the public from making assumptions beyond that because you don't know which of those breadcrumb trails to follow. Whereas if everything was consistent, people might be able to use logic and, great detective skills to get to the end, get further and further and further.
I see. So yeah, it's a way of keeping people from panic because there's more than one source of information or more than one philosophy of what these...
Or just like sowing confusion and debate within the UFO community, right? Like if one UFO researcher, favors one of the bits of info, one of the theories, and another one favors another theory and they conflict, then... they're less likely to work together,
I would say the only thing that...
they'll be caught up in debating each other rather than making progress, right?
Yeah. I mean, I would say that it seems like maybe more recently we're getting more of the disclosure, but you would assume like there's been inquiries of this in the past too.
Oh, yeah.
So it's not like they didn't have an opportunity to start this process at an earlier time. It's
right.
It's more and I think and it makes
if
me
it is a controlled
that,
disclosure, then maybe in the further past before like 2017 and stuff, maybe the strategy was to drip out these ideas through sci-fi and Hollywood.
Yeah, and at least
so that people get comfortable with thinking about it.
Yeah, I could see that. I also think. I mean, if the entities or whatever they are don't want to be known by the public, or maybe they don't care, what would it mean to them if everybody now knows, right?
Right.
So what would it mean to whatever it is, and how would they react? And if they don't care either way, why is it that they just haven't done it themselves? In order to, unless it goes, and if they don't want it, that's even scarier, because if it does come out eventually through, whatever means, does that mean that it's going to set them off, or maybe they'll leave, or whatever it might?
But I take his point that they are in fact risking a catastrophic disclosure by not disclosing.
They might just come out and
it very well could be some person who actually knows way too much, doesn't have all that much of a threat. There's not that much that they can hang above his head with family and whatnot. And maybe he's you know what, F it, I'm just gonna go for it and drop all the info I know. And if that were to happen, that would change things, and then they would lose control
of the narrative.
Right?
Yeah. All right. You got any more of this?
Yeah.
All right, let's keep going.
And what do you think happens if we don't disclose? I know you mentioned this idea of catastrophic disclosure. Maybe disclosure may be forced upon us. How do you think about that?
So the situation is usually thought of as a binary state. It's like an all or nothing. And people have sort of argued this. But anybody paying attention realizes the government has already indicated that unidentified anomalous phenomena are real, they're not ours, and they're not our adversaries. The Pentagon has said that. For people that are paying attention, that shoe already dropped. So for a lot of people, they think that the second shoe to drop is this is non-human intelligence, and maybe the conversation stops there. The president comes out and says, there's non-human intelligence. The truth is that will precipitate this crescendo of other questions that maybe the government's not ready to answer, that will court, if not precipitate, potential negative ramification for society. And so as an example of this, I would actually point to something from the ancient past, the Bronze Age collapse. So Eric Klein, Princeton University, 2015, wrote a very interesting book called 1177 BC, the year that civilization failed. And so this is well known to current scholarship. Within a single lifetime, all of the very effective ancient civilizations of the Bronze Age failed due to a confluence of reasons that are not necessarily fully understood today. So we're talking about Egypt, the Hittite Empire, the Minoan Empire, the Manasseh Empire, the Babylonian Empire. All these civilizations failed, never to return, other than, let's say, Egypt. And so these were highly sophisticated civilizations with highly developed infrastructures, highly developed administrative states. They were globalist, in a sense, very similar to today in terms of the known world, the known Near East. They were economically interdependent. They had both diplomatic ties and commerce ties. And yet these civilizations failed in a single lifetime because of stressors that these civilizations collectively could not address within the time frame. And so if we look at our society today, one might argue that it's similarly fractured, similarly under economic stress, similarly under cultural stress as well, fractured and fragile diplomatic situation. It mirrors very much this scenario.
Yeah.
And so for a responsible decision maker, that is certainly a factor.
And so
I don't really buy that argument per se, but it's an interesting one.
Yeah, I mean, that was a kind of example.
I mean, he's basically just saying they're afraid society can collapse.
Yeah, he didn't necessarily give. I think your example was a little bit better of a whistleblower within the government having too much information and being able to drop a bomb on society. It's not a literal bomb, but a figurative bomb and information.
I mean, to be fair, with
and physical evidence and all that.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, with a catastrophic disclosure where all the info comes out, and if it's dark. If they're involved with us and we're some sort of,
tool or
farm for them in some way, you know, then I could see people kind of freaking out. It would definitely be a lot of upheaval in religions, and it would be, it could be definitely disruptive, but collapse, I don't know.
I mean, societally, I think it could. I think it has the potential of collapsing certain societies, especially if what is known becomes known is dark enough, and knowing that your government had a hand in covering it up.
Or maybe that's sort of alluding to like fears of like an uprising or rebellion, right? Because if people are pissed enough because the information that comes out is so big and so important, they can lose massive trust in the government.
It's like, I don't think people are going anywhere. It's not going to be like a thing that we're going to die off. I think the society as it is at this time may collapse, and something might come in its place. Like, you know, he mentioned how Egypt came back. You know, all it takes is another strong leader who can, you know, put people, or maybe not even a leader, hopefully not a leader, really. Hopefully just some libertarian government, non-government.
Right. Let's see, where are we at? Let's see if we can finish out this video before the first break.
When you say that, are you implying that perhaps we as a society may not be ready for disclosure? Or are you saying that we may not be able to defend ourselves against this other force?
So there's sort of different viewpoints on, you know, whether people are ready to, you know, deal with this phenomenon. And, you know, popular culture is kind of infused with this stuff. Roswell became a meme a long time ago. We got programs on ancient aliens, Skinwalker Ranch, all this stuff. I guess I would draw an analogy, though, for people that believe in a certain faith tradition, whatever that faith tradition is, and hold to that and subscribe to that in a very serious and devout way. And you know, sort of pose the question, even for folks of that ilk, and I would count myself as one, if you're confronted with the reality of your religious belief system, like the reality of the metaphysical, an angel, a messenger from God, what have you, that's going to be a sea state change in your way of dealing with reality, right? Even though you already believe it, right? So it's one thing to believe and it's another to know. And I think in this context, this phenomena has the potential for an analogous effect, both on the individual and on society.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
That's a good point right there.
Yeah, it definitely is. Because I do this like weird dance in my head all the time where like I start, you know, going down some UFO rabbit hole, and every once in a while I catch myself and I'm like, why am I wasting my time on this stuff? I'm never going to have the answers. Like, I'm just like wishful thinking. Like, this is just like the child in me, like trying to fantasize about reality, right? Like, so it's hard, like when you're researching something and you're like, you have a belief, but if that, like, you can't really convince yourself to really act on it too much. But if it becomes a reality, all of a sudden, like acting on it, not acting on it becomes the crazy thing, right?
Right. Not doing something about it, not doing the things that you know you should be doing within your belief. Like, it's not a belief anymore, it's a reality at that point, right?
Right.
So even if it uproots, and especially if it uproots your beliefs, whatever religion or whatever,
or even confirms them, as he says, you know, like he's also making allusions to the you know, angels and demons interpretations of UFOs here, right? So like, it's one thing for, you know, the Christians and, you know, the Abrahamic religions around the world to believe in angels and demons, but to like know
something, well, and even just to know that the metaphysical is real, not even to confirm that specifically, but to know that alone, you can't help but assign it to the religious stories that you've heard all your life, or as long as you've been studying it, right? So all you need is to know that the metaphysical and these different beings are real, and they have come down and have done all these things, and then all the religions may even be like, there might be new religions, or not religions but faiths, I guess,
right,
where they're starting to like harden and be like, and I guess they would just, I don't know, maybe that would be the beginning of the mystery schools coming out of hiding and like spreading the truth of the beginnings of these ancient religions and stuff, right?
I would be very excited to hear Neil deGrasse Tyson's first podcast after we know this is real.
Yeah. That would be good. All right.
I would do a tour through all the skeptical science folk.
But do you think that the phenomena, this non-human form of intelligence, represents a threat to humanity?
So this is a good question too, and some of the other folks have sort of framed things in that light. And I guess I would suggest that if the universe is governed by conservation laws, and it's probably reasonable to assume the laws of nature that we understand apply everywhere. We may have incomplete understanding, undoubtedly we do, of these laws, but they're sort of homogeneous and they apply throughout the universe. And so those laws are governed by conservation rules. There's conserved quantities. And so this reality really forces a Darwinian type competition in order to survive. And so it's reasonable to assume any other civilization that's evolved has come up through the same Darwinian evolutionary process. So I think it's naive to expect complete altruism until and unless you get to a state of post-scarcity, where you essentially have no physical needs that we're kind of encumbered with in this universe. And so in some sense, it's the economics of the future that are going to determine whether there's cooperation, competition, or some kind of symbiosis, and inform the intention. But to assume either malintent or complete altruism, I think, is somewhat naive.
Yeah, it's great. Another great point. Yeah, I mean, if it's a physical being, whether it has capabilities beyond us, if it's a physical being with needs and scarcity of those needs, scarcity of the resources to fulfill those needs, then you can't assign altruism to it.
Yeah, I struggle with this point because, it really depends because it could go either way depending on who they are, right? Mm-hmm. Like if they're physical beings and if they originate from outside of our star system,
right?
Okay,
right. Or even planet.
So they're not like future or past humans
or AI
or or AI is a weird one, but let's say they're like biological creatures from a neighboring star system. Right. Like the ability to travel to our star system kind of implies way more advanced of science and tech, like generations ahead of us.
And you would assume also that they have way more advanced ways of meeting their needs.
That's exactly my point, right? Yeah. Like there's going to be meteors and other planets and moons.
For them to mine and take resources from, And if they had that ability
unless,
to limitlessly.
Again, the specific resources they're looking for are resources that are only created through biological processes.
Or only created in certain areas within the universe that are experiencing that type of energy transformation at that time too. Because you could expect pockets where certain elements may be more and less likely within the universe, right?
So it's definitely not safe to make assumptions.
Of course,
and his point is valid in that. But,
exactly,
I wouldn't lean too heavily on they're only if they're coming here, they're coming to steal our resources. That while that's possible, I don't rank that very highly in my head for likelihood.
So you don't think there's serpents stealing our souls?
Well, again, this was the caveat that they're physical beings, right? But
all right,
so it sounds like what you're saying is it's impossible to know the true intentions of a higher intelligence. We may be competing for the same scarce resources. We may not be, right? We may be almost irrelevant to them, and they may be acting altruistically, although we cannot safely assume that. And so I guess I'm curious, if we continue down this disclosure path, do you believe that disclosure is inevitable?
So, again, people that sort of look at this topic and study it, and there have been some good examinations on this from a historical standpoint, have realized that, like, we're not in really a new state. Like, this sort of disclosure emphasis has come and gone over time. And so this is not the first time we've arrived at this stage. I would suggest that maybe the peak of this current cycle happened last December with the Schumer amendment, and then it got rolled back. It was defeated in the House. And so it remains to be seen, if the process is going to continue. One hopes and can maybe draw a little bit of confidence that maybe this will come around is the colloquy that Senator Schumer and Senator Rounds had back in December. After their amendment got killed, they basically went on the Senate floor and articulated their rationale for the legislation. And I think Senator Schumer, to quote him, almost said it was a travesty that this did not pass. So this is, a bipartisan colloquy on a topic that I guess most people would probably consider fringe, and yet these two senators felt the need to do that and to double down on their desire to see this through.
Yeah.
So hopefully we'll see maybe a reintroduction of some version of that this summer, with the goal of maybe putting it into the NDAA by the end of the year.
Do you think that it's imperative that the United States leads on the disclosure efforts?
So why don't we actually cut it off there? I'll put the link to the video again if you guys want to finish it out. But most of the topics that were covered were the main things I wanted to cover, and we are already ready for a break. So
cool.
But yeah, that's it's interesting, and another good point that.
And he's very good at articulating.
Yeah, we definitely go through waves of disclosure. And there has been times in the past where more has come out, and then the whole topic goes quiet again, and then there'll be another wave, and then the topic goes quiet again. So,
yeah, like I was alluding to before,
I mean, it seems a pretty strong wave this time, and
also I think disclosure is inevitable in the sense of we are getting to a point now in technology where it's getting harder. It'll only continue to be harder and harder for them to hide these sightings.
Well, yes and no.
Poo-poo.
You can imagine in 5 years when everyone has AI built into their smartphones, provided by OpenAI, who's funded by the NSA and Apple, and it scans your phone, and if it sees you taking photos of UFOs, oh man, where'd that picture go? I wanted to show someone. Oh, I got to show you this picture I took of a UFO the other day, and you go and look. Where'd that picture go?
Yeah, but that would happen. That would be an increasingly like you would just get. What about live streams and stuff, right? You could live stream something, and other people could take screenshots and save it. And I mean, they would. If that was true, you would eventually get to a point where if it was happening often enough, that enough people were pointing their cameras on live streams at these things, that enough people would notice it being wiped, and it would get to a point where there would be a reckoning.
But it used to be the case that like just the power, and right now it still is, but that people, the wide, vast numbers of people across the globe with internet access, once something goes public, you can't unpublic it. But as we enter the age of AI, the reason it was impossible to unpublic it is because no one has the manpower or the resources or the access. But you would have the manpower in the age of AI. All of a sudden, you don't need to hire armies of tens or hundreds of millions of people to be able to monitor and control. And instead, you've got these automated systems that as soon as they detect it, oh, my stream went blank, you know?
Yeah.
But anyway, so obviously that's like a weird, like sort of dark dystopian
version
way,
of it.
but like we have to all be careful and cautious of like AI
types of
companies
AI we
partnering up with
allow.
governments.
Yeah.
Because the types of control structures that governments like to employ are often limited by manpower, and because it becomes impractical for them to enact some of the stuff they want to. But if they get a free labor force, a free intelligent labor force with AI, then all of a sudden the types of control structures they can impose are a lot different.
Definitely something to think about.
Yeah. So let's take our first break here. Here is another song by TJ McNulty. This is called Nickels and Dimes.
I had a nickel for every time I lied to myself. I'd buy myself some common sense and make those cents stack into dollars. I'll bury them deep, not to be bothered, so I don't spend it again on me again. Well, no, 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 not on me again. It's something about your currency that doesn't sit easy with me, but I understand you have the riches of 1,000 men and always handled opportunities well, invested in stocks as others fell, always had the cash flow to keep your feet on the go. Well, you were always a capitalist of love's riches.
Hope you enjoyed that song by TJ.
Nickels and Dimes.
All right, we're back. Before we hop into some secret history of the world, I want to read this article by Griffith University. Smallest arm bone in human fossil record sheds light on the dawn of Homo Floresiensis. A new study in the Nature Communications, co-authored by Griffith University, reports the discovery of extremely rare early human fossils from the Indonesian island of Flores, including an astonishingly small adult limb bone. Dated to about 700,000 years old, the new findings shed light on the evolution of Homo Floresiensis, the so-called hobbits of the Flores, whose remains were uncovered in 2003 at Liang Buao Cave in the island's west by a team co-led by Australian-New Zealand archaeologist Professor Mike Morwood. The archaeological evidence suggests these diminutive small-brained humans inhabited Liang Buao in as recently as 50,000 years ago, a time when our own species, Homo sapiens, were already long established in Australia to the south. There has been much debate about the origin of the mysterious humans from Flores. It was first hypothesized that Homo floresiensis was a dwarfed descendant of early Asian Homo erectus. Another theory is that the hobbit is a late surviving remnant of a more ancient hominin from Africa that predates Homo erectus and was small in stature and began with, in which case possible candidates include Homo habilis or the famous Lucy, Australopithecus afarensis. Other than Liang Buao, hominin fossils have only ever been found in a single location on Flores, the open-aired site of Mata Menge, 75 kilometers to the east of the cave. Located in the sparsely populated tropical grasslands of the Soa Basin, this site, they highlight, this site has previously yielded several hominin fossils. Predating the Liang Buao hominins by 650,000 years, the Mata Menge fossils remains have been shown to belong to at least 3 individuals with even slightly smaller jaws and teeth than the Homo floresiensis, implying that small body size evolved early in the history of Flores hominins. So yeah, they found kind of an early 700,000 year old version of the Homo floresiensis.
So it's a precursor
to well, yeah, they're basically genetically Homo floresiensis. They're just 700,000 years old when the most recent ones are, and the larger ones are like 50,000 years old. So 650,000 years earlier, and they're still wondering what was the precursor to it. They're trying to figure out what the precursor is to that.
Well, because there also has to be time for them to get there and still somehow hook back into the same sort of hominin family tree.
Yeah, if you're trying to connect them.
Because they didn't independently evolve on that island.
Unless they did.
I mean, it doesn't really fit evolution, but yeah.
No, but it does fit panspermia. It could fit panspermia.
I guess. If there's just little mini hominins falling out of the sky.
Or like the precursor DNA to it.
Sure. Speaking of which, actually, I just want to talk about this real quick. I won't play the video.
Yeah.
But I just came across this guy today in his talk. This is Denis Noble, and he is he's like a systems biologist, which is like essentially a biologist who
biological systems biologist.
Yeah, they try and look at like whole systems rather than just zoning in on a particular
aspect
area
or whatever.
But he's very interested in evolution, and he's basically arguing against Neo-Darwinism. saying that, he's arguing against it, but he also agrees with it to a certain extent. So Neo-Darwinism is... So Darwin didn't know about genetics in his time.
Right.
And Darwin actually believed that there was probably some way that creatures could adapt and then pass on those adaptations, like within even a lifetime, to their offspring. But Neo-Darwinism, with the
knowledge of genetics,
and then this scientist named Weissman came up with this idea of the Weissman barrier. So there's two different types of cells. One way you could segregate types of cells is germ cells and soma cells. So soma cells being basically all the cells in your body, and germ cells being like eggs and sperm. And he says that Weissman says that there's a barrier between the soma and the term I just used that I somehow just lost. The germ cells. He says there's a barrier between them. And this has been a big part of Neo-Darwinism, is that basically your body protects off your reproductive cells, so that even if you do mutate in your own lifetime, you're less likely to pass down a mutation that the chances are would be a net negative to the species if passed on. And so that sort of segregates the germ cells from being messed with within a generation. Basically only allowing room for the mechanism of natural selection by random mutation as being the way that genetics changes over time. And that's the Neo-Darwin theory, right? So he's arguing against that, saying that, well, basically Neo-Darwinism is dying, and he claims it's basically already dead, and that people who are like at the cutting edge in the field know this, but it hasn't been really communicated down to everyone yet. But that there are in fact multiple ways that we know that things do pass the Weissman barrier.
I was gonna say selective breeding, like the creature itself seeing something. I mean, when humans, it's easy to see, but you would have to, like, having some feature be useful in a mate and it having a higher likelihood of creating the offspring.
Yeah, but selective breeding still isn't passing information into your germ cells. It's just picking two mating pairs that have a trait that you want, right? And then over time, statistics
it would
will
still have to
control for that trait.
Have to pass on through that barrier, right? So
no, the trait would already exist. You would look for two.
Passing it on, though.
Passing it on would be because the trait is already there. You're just pairing people into a breeding pair in order to get more of it in the next generation. Anyway,
yeah.
So he says, so epigenetics is one way. So epigenetics is the discovery of the stuff that covers the DNA, that deactivates it, and that our genes aren't always active, right? Like we'll have all these genes, but only certain ones are active. So that protective cover gets removed in order for the cell to start producing proteins based off of that gene. But he says that epigenetic changes get communicated into germ cells. That's been proven now.
Okay.
And also, I forget the term he used, but there's these types of material that cells put out that communicate to each other, different
like
genetic
pheromone?
changes. Not a pheromone, but
obviously, but I mean like a pheromone.
Yeah,
signals.
sure. I guess they're the intercellular communication, but that some of that material is known to pass into the germ cells, and then he says, essentially, what we know now is that when your body, or like when a creature or an organism is under stress, and it needs, like, let's say it gets a new novel infection, right? The first thing it'll do is it'll search its DNA for a protein that it can use to bind onto that pathogen for an immune response, for instance, right? Mm-hmm. If it can't find a gene to use to create the protein it needs, then he says what the body will do is it'll send out a message to the immune system to tell all the cells to shut down their mutation protections. So the cells have mechanisms inside that help protect against mutation, but every so often when it needs something new that it doesn't have in its toolkit, it can actually disable those mutation protections,
So that
allowing the cells to all mutate in a specific gene.
to allow
create
for
new
the creation of a new, basically adaptation of whatever new is being interjected into the
Right.
system.
So it's still using random changes, but it's random changes. It's the body understanding that random changes are part of how it can adapt, and it's saying, hey guys,
Let's do that.
everyone,
It's the button. They're hitting the
everyone
red
try
button.
something.
Yeah.
And whichever cells come up with the mutation that actually works, that can bind to that pathogen, as soon as they find the solution to that, they can communicate that out and input that change into the cells.
Wow.
And so it's a way that life has to essentially turn on adaptation, turn on active evolution when it needs something.
Wow. That's really cool.
And that those changes can also pass the Weissman barrier. And so essentially it's a new perspective on evolution, where it's not just mutation by natural selection or natural selection with mutations. It's active mutation on purpose in order to achieve a goal.
Yeah.
And he says you really need to have a more holistic view of the organism, and that it's not genes that are in control of things. It's the system outside. It's the holistic system.
The checks and balances that all,
Yeah.
it's a checks and balances system.
So I'm going to get this guy's book,
cool.
and I would like to dive in
That's
because that would be a really good episode.
That's
and I'm
fascinating.
super fascinated. He only has a few interviews that I can look up. So I think I'm just going to read his book. But
Okay.
anyway, super fascinating stuff. So check him out. His name is Denis Noble.
Cool.
And I'll leave some links to the videos I did find.
Nice.
So anyway, you want to dive into a little bit?
Yeah, we'll get the first little bit started on Secret History of the World by Mark Booth. We left off on chapter 11. If you are listening to this now, go back and listen. And, we basically read a few, entries, and then we talk about it. So we're not going to go through the entire book. I skipped through quite a bit coming up. I read a fair amount in the beginning, but then, we skip around a bit. So this is chapter 12, The Descent into Darkness, Moses and the Kabbalah, Akhenaten and Satan, Solomon, Sheba, and Hiram, King Arthur, and the Crown Chakra. So they start by talking about how Egyptian civilization is perhaps the most successful in the recorded history, lasting over 3,000 years. Compare this with the Euro-American Christian civilizations, which so far have lasted only about 2,000. Another notable thing is Egypt's extraordinarily well-preserved historical records, which has survived on temple walls, on tablets, and in papyri. These have been vital in placing neighboring civilizations that have left less complete records and remains in the chronological context. So Egypt did a lot to help piece together the past of a lot of
right, and because they interacted with a bunch of civilizations and they were good at keeping records, they become the ones that we are able to learn about other civilizations through.
So in the 1990s, a group of younger archaeologists based in Austria and London and led by David Rohl began to question the conventional chronology of Egypt. More particularly, they came to realize that in the period of the third intermediate dynasty, 2 kings lists, which have been understood to run one after the other, should be really understood as running concurrently. This had the effect of shortening the chronology of ancient Egypt by approximately 400 years, known as the New Chronology. It is gradually gaining ground even among the older generation of Egyptologists. So the incident is that, what they're basically able to do with this new chronology is place better stories from biblical texts and ancient texts. So they're able to place them in a different layer of the ancient, the layers that they're looking for in from the biblical times.
Right, but by placing them concurrent and shortening the timeline, like that just sounds like a way to say Egypt isn't nearly as old. It sounds like also like the earliest parts of the King's List, which they were like, oh, that's just myth.
Right.
Like this is the part that's historical, and this part we're going to say it's myth. I mean, I get it because they do make claims like this particular king ruled for 500 years or whatever.
Yeah, and they're talking about a certain time frame that they moved earlier. They're not talking about all of Egypt either. But Mark Booth continues here, and he says, the human condition gives us extraordinary latitude for believing what we want to believe. But for anyone who does not have a strong ulterior motive for believing that the biblical stories are just fairy tales, this new evidence is quite compelling. It shows that Moses did not live in about 1250 BC, contemporary with Ramses II. Instead, he was born in about 1540 BC, and the Exodus took place in approximately 1447 BC. Using astronomical retrocalculations, Venus observations recorded in the Mesopotamian texts that cross-reference both the Bible and also surviving Egyptian records. So David Rohl, the leader of that archaeologist party, has provided strong evidence to show that Moses was brought up an Egyptian prince in the reign of Neferhotep I in the mid-16th century BC. Rohl has found complementary evidence in the account by Artapanus, a Jewish historian of the 3rd century BC, who may well have had access to the now lost records from the Egyptian temples. Artapanus related how Prince Mozos became a popular administrator under Khenepres, Neferhotep's the first successor. Mozos was then sent into exile when the pharaoh became jealous of him. So that was in the text, basically, is that story of the Prince of Mozos. Like they're trying to relate the text from Egyptian,
from Egypt to the Bible. Said the King of Mozos.
Prince of Mozos. Prince Mozos, not of Moses, but Prince Mozos became.
How do they spell that?
Mousos. So Rohl showed that the pharaoh of the Exodus was Khenepres' successor Dudimose, Excavations at the Dudamose level have revealed that the remains of a foreign settlement of slave or workers, such as are also referred to in the Brooklyn Papyrus, a royal decree authorizing transfer of such a group at just this time. This settlement may have been built for or by the Hebrews. There are also death pits and evidence of hasty mass burials, which may be traces of the biblical plagues.
Whoa. Interesting.
Yeah.
Dang.
So, as an Egyptian prince, Moses was initiated into the Egyptian mysteries. This recorded by the Egyptian historian Manetho, who identified Heliopolis as the mystery school. It is confirmed in Acts 7, chapter 7. Why am I losing it?
Chapter
7 and verse 22, where the apostle Stephen says, "And Moses was instructed in all the wisdom of the Egyptians." So,
right.
Some more evidence. And then spell 125 in the Book of the Dead describes the judgment of the dead. The spirit is required to declare to Osiris that he has led a good life, then denying having committed a list of specific immoral acts to the 42 judges of the dead. I have not robbed, I have not killed, and I have not borne false witness, and so on. Of course, this predates the 10 Commandments. It is no denigration of Moses to point this out. His teachings could not have done otherwise than grow out of the given historical milieu.
Right.
So
saying that the 10 Commandments come from the Egyptian Book of the Dead.
Right.
Huh.
And that he adapted it to his needs. Or he just took from it and changed it a bit to what suited him and his philosophy or thoughts, right?
Yeah.
And then
I kind of like the story that it went on the mountain and got high on acacia.
The burning bush.
Yeah.
So, a sense of mission arose out of Moses' vision of the burning bush, an impulse to work for the greater good of humanity, to lead us all to the land flowing with milk and honey. And then, the story of Moses. It talks about him hesitating at the task. And he said, "Thou shalt take this rod in thy hand, wherewith thou shalt do signs." As Moses journeyed back to Egypt, he intended to ask the Pharaoh to set my people free. And then, I'm going to skip that part. So in Numbers chapter 7, verse 19, to save them, Moses nailed a bronze serpent across and raised a horizontal pole. And then John chapter 3, verse 14 comments on his passage in the Old Testament. And just as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so must the Son of Man be lifted up. So clearly in Mark Booth, he says, clearly John is seeing the bronze serpent as foreshadowing the crucified Jesus Christ lifted up. Carries with it a sense of being transformed or transfigured. The bronze serpent has been smelted, so looks forward. John suggests to be the transfiguration of the material body of humanity. That's his interpretation.
That one I don't super follow.
And he clarifies a bit. He said the rod that Moses used to smite the Egyptians and to discipline his own people was an image of the Lucifer serpent of animal consciousness that has been straightened and subdued by willpower, and a moral discipline that is very hard to maintain. The great gift then of Moses gave to his people was guilt. Morality emerges into history with Moses, and with it a call to a change of a heart. So the whole idea of being like the foreshadowing of Jesus, and then like the idea of it being a transfiguration of humanity, like that's when morality was imbued in humanity because of the following he had.
But if he got the commandments from Egypt, then he didn't come up with it. So I don't know about laying that at his feet. This is another one of those ones I don't fully agree with him on, but I find it's an interesting idea. Let's I think we're over for our next break, so let's do that, and we'll come back and do some more secret history.
Cool.
This is Swimmer by Stevie Nader.
When I was a young boy, I'd beg time to pass. Now that is coming, I wanna go back. When I was a young boy, I'd beg time to pass. Now that is coming, I wanna go back. When I was younger, I'd beg time to pass. Now that is come, though I try to drown all of the sorrows within, but I fail to do so, 'cause my demons could swim. When I got to the bottoms of bottles of sin, well, it did me no good, 'cause my demons could swim. Demons could swim, swim. Demons swim, swim. Demons swim, could swim. Demons swim. Though I try to drown all of the sorrows within, but I fail to do so, 'cause my demons could swim. When I got to the bottoms of bottles of sin, well, it did me no good, 'cause my demons could swim. Demons could swim, swim. Demons swim.
Hello,
Yeah.
we're here.
I guess
That
that was
cut off
another
quick.
timely one. Yeah, it did. We were just talking about Moses inventing morality, and Stevie singing about, dealing with your demons.
It seems to be working out. The music has been pretty lined up with our topics. So, yeah, let's jump back in here.
All right.
So he starts this next course of thought by saying, again, it is no denigration of Moses or the Kabbalah to point out that this grew out of an older tradition, the mystical number system of the Egyptians. Reams of mathematical calculations have not come down to us from ancient Egypt, but their understanding of higher mathematics has survived in Egyptian art. For example, the eye of Horus was often represented as the Uja eye, which they now know was made up of a number of hieroglyphics representing fractions, which add up to the total of 63 64ths. If you reverse this and divide 64 by 63, then you come up with what has been called the greatest secret of the Egyptians, a number called the comma of Pythagoras. Highly complex numbers like the comma of Pythagoras, pi and phi, sometimes called the golden proportion, are known as irrational numbers. They lie deep in the structure of the physical universe. They were seen by the Egyptians as the principles controlling creation, the principles by which matter is precipitated from the cosmic mind. Today, scientists recognize that the comma of Pythagoras, pi, and the golden proportion, as well as the closely related Fibonacci sequence, are universal constants that describe complex patterns in astronomy, music, and physics.
And biology.
Yeah, exactly. For example, the Fibonacci sequence is a series in which each number is the sum of two preceding it. Spirals are built up according to this sequence. It is rampant in nature, and the spirals of galaxies, the shape of ammonites, and the arrangement of leaves on a stem. To the Egyptians, these numbers were also the secret harmonies of the cosmos, and they incorporated them as rhythms and proportions in the construction of their pyramids and temples. A building made in this way would be ideal. A hall, a doorway, a window, which had the golden proportions built into it, would be ineffably pleasing to the human spirit. The great temples of Egypt are, of course, bursting with vegetable forms, such as the bulrush-shaped pillars of the great hypostyle at Karnak, but it was the vegetable life that gave the proportion to human limb. The vegetable life that turns ribs and makes them curve according to a pleasing mathematical formula that the temple builders were particularly concerned to reproduce. The point is that the Egyptian temples were built in this way because the gods were no longer able to inhabit bodies of flesh and blood. A temple was built to be the body of the god, no less. The god's spirit lived inside the vegetable and material bodies that the temple embodied, just as the human spirit lives inside of the vegetable and material bodies.
That section makes me think of Randall Carlson and his sacred geometry course.
Yeah, because he talks about all the commonalities between the macro and the micro and all that too, right?
But he also talks about like how architects have been engendering or incorporating these numbers into their creations since way back. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, in that idea, it kind of we talked about it before as like the gods are getting further and further away from being able to inhabit the physical realm anymore, right? And this is another example of a way of that they were trying to maintain that connection by building their buildings in such a way and their structures in such a way that the gods could inhabit them,
right,
and use those as a way to communicate their will to the man,
it's
to
like
man,
the
right?
Principle of as above, so below.
Yeah, so you model your structures to mimic it and allow the stream of consciousness or the cosmic mind or whatever. Excuse me.
All right there, buddy.
A little tickle. So the Hebrews have not left a rich architectural heritage like the Egyptians. Their number mysticism has come down to us encoded in the language of the Book of Moses. The great book of the Kabbalah is the Zohar, which is a vast commentary on the first 5 books of the Old Testament. Traditionally ascribed to Moses, if the world is materialized thought, then according to the Kabbalah, words and letters were the means by which the process happened. God created the world by manipulating and making patterns out of the Hebrew letters of the alphabet. Hebrew letters, therefore, have magical properties, and the patterns they make in Scripture open up layers, indeed vistas, of hidden meaning. Exodus chapter 14 contains 3 verses, 19, 20, and 21, which each consist of 72 letters. If you write these verses on top of one another so that the 72 letters appear in columns, then reading a column at a time, you will discover the secret 72 names of God. Each Hebrew letter is also a number. Aleph, the Hebrew A, is 1. Beth is 2, and so on. There are complex connections here. The Hebrew word for father has a numerical value of 3. The word for mother has a value of 41. The Hebrew word for a child is 44. The combination of father and mother, basically, the combination of father and mother, numerically as well as, physically. Right. So he kind of skips. The language is the connection between.
Yeah, the number assignment has meaning too.
Is the code.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it gets more mind-blowing. The numerical value of the Hebrew phrase for the Garden of Eden is 144. The numerical value of the tree of knowledge is 233. If you divide 233 by 144, you get very close to 4 decimal points to the value of the golden ratio phi. In the last few decades, mathematicians have applied themselves to the task of finding messages encoded in the text of the books of Moses. Breakthrough work by Whitstam, I'm sure I'm saying that wrong, Rips and Rosenberg aim at discovering transcription codes using equidistant letter sequences. The published result includes some names of the post-biblical historical figures from Hebrew history, but as yet no propositions, no sequences of sentences, or anything that could be read as a message. Again, it is not my secret to reveal, but one Cambridge-based statistician has shown me the results of applying an extremely complex skip code, a code verified as valid by the Cambridge University professors of mathematics. The fragments he showed me were reminiscent of the Psalms. Imagine if a whole other book or series of books were encoded in the text we have. Would each of these texts have different layers of meaning too? Such an achievement is beyond the capacity of normal human intelligence.
Right. That's like a 100D crossword puzzle.
Yeah.
Because to write an entire tome and pick your words so strategically that you can then apply mathematic algorithms to decode
a whole other story
or other stories out of it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's insane. And if it's true, that's insane. I don't know what else to say about that.
I mean, it's one of those things where like, the counter argument being that if you just throw enough key phrases, right, like the key you use to calculate your skips, if you just keep working and try different key phrases or number sequences for your skips, I mean, eventually you're going to come up with something that means something.
Sure. But for it to be something that's readable and something that means something.
I mean, still statistically, you probably could come up with, you could probably take almost any random book and find an exact.
Well, they do. There's somebody. I remember I watched a Wild Files episode on somebody who applied code to the Bible and applied code to and they found the names of every historical figure ever.
Right.
Right. But you could do that as long as you allow, you can change your algorithm or calculations in order to allow it.
Right.
Or you allow enough leniency within your code.
Right. If you're just
translate.
if you're doing guess and check as your methodology for like finding the key code, like, oh, let's try this.
Sure.
Oh, let's try that. Oh,
Yeah.
let's try this.
It's
and eventually you
open for-
come up with something. It's less convincing than if you were applying something as your codex that is like meaningful in some way. Like, for instance, like a particular saying from the Bible
Is the code
that then unlocks
Yeah.
a whole nother meaning. Like,
Yeah,
if that
that's
was
true.
the case, that would be a lot more stunning
That's true, yeah.
and hard to ignore.
I mean, yeah, it says an extremely complex skip code. So if it's extremely complex, that means you have made it extremely complex.
Right.
Like,
It
doesn't mean that it
you took a lot of
requires a
time to
complex-
come up to make your skip code more and more and more complicated until something finally popped out the other side.
Right.
Or with computers, you could even probably reverse engineer and like pre-write whatever you want to come out on the other end, and then have the computer chug away on what skip code you would need to apply to come up with it.
True. So some of the other stuff they use this on is recent research by an occult group has shown that J.S. Bach composed some of the world's most beautiful melodies, such as the famous chaconne, while at the same time giving each note the value of a letter of the alphabet. Bach's music spells out secret psalm-like messages. This again is surely something beyond normal human intelligence. So, depending on, like we're saying, depending on how you apply it, right?
Or it's the result of being a nerd in the time before the internet and TV.
That's what you did. You just sat there, and just write
Yeah.
codes until you
I
find
mean,
something.
People do weird music experiments like this all the time. I don't know if you've ever watched anything like this since you don't really do music, but there's a bunch of videos online where like people will go into like a DAW, which is digital audio workstation software you use for making music, what we're recording in right now. And inside of a DAW, you have a thing called a MIDI sequencer, where it's just a grid where like one axis is all the notes and the other axis is time. And like people will like draw out patterns that are just like visually pleasing, or they'll like draw out like words and then play it and like it'll sound cool. And like some people like crunch away at the art of like making MIDI art that turns into something that's pleasing to hear. And so in a similar way, like that seems like the same kind of nerd.
Sure.
The same kind of nerding out with music that you could like Bach could do. And it's like, okay, well, people for a long time have made the observation on how like mathematical music is. So if you can translate between music and the math, and then you can use the math to assign letter values back to the notes, then like you could have some fun with that and keep messing around until you come up with something that sounds really good.
I mean, that could be a whole form of art on itself, right?
Right.
So they do talk about this kind of language, right? That people that you could call it. So in esoteric circles, language which is imbued with initiates with layers of meaning is sometimes called the green language, or the language of the birds. Perhaps we all speak the green language all the time. Perhaps the only difference between us and the great initiates like Shakespeare is that they do it consciously. At the height of the Egyptian New Kingdom, the reign of Akhenaten's father, Amenhotep III, seemed to signal a new era of even greater peace and prosperity, which, even if didn't match the unique achievement of the Great Pyramid, would see the construction of the most magnificent temples of the ancient world.
Just real quick, I
was gonna say, actually, this is kind of going off into a whole different thing. So what were you saying?
I just typed in the green language in Perplexity. So it says the green language, also known as the language of the birds, is a term found in various mythological, alchemical, and esoteric traditions. It's considered a mystical or divine language that conveys hidden or perfect knowledge to those who are initiated into its mysteries. The key aspects. Mystical and esoteric language. The green language is often described as a sacred or divine form of communication that reveals hidden truths and perfect knowledge. It's associated with spiritual awakening and enlightenment. In various cultural contexts, the language of the birds is seen as a magical or mythical language used by birds to communicate with the initiated. It appeared in folklore where protagonists gained the ability to understand the birds, often leading to revelations or warnings.
Yeah, you learn a bird's language, you learn it's like warning you of something. Like that could be a useful thing.
Maybe the rebelling against that is the birds aren't real conspiracy. In alchemical and occult traditions, the green language is seen as a key to understanding deeper esoteric truths. Fulcanelli, an influential alchemist, referred to it as a language that unveils the most hidden truths, suggesting its role in spiritual and mystical teachings.
So yeah, actually, I'm... let me see.
Is that all you want to cover in this chapter?
Yeah, I was gonna go into this maybe. Yeah, I guess we'll cover a little bit of this. So this is starts to talk about Sigmund Freud's interest in the Kabbalah and his, pulling from that history. So as we will see, it was a formulative influence on his thought, but he got hold of the wrong end of the stick. So this is referencing his interest in the Kabbalah.
Yeah.
When he argued that the Egyptian pharaoh Akhenaten was the source of Moses' monotheism, we now know Moses came first. Akhenaten's ideas of monotheism were subtly but dangerously different. So, yeah, it's kind of changing the orientation of the history. Instead of, Moses taking stuff from Akhenaten, he may have been the progenitor of it if he was actually before that time. So at the height of the Egyptian New Kingdom, the reign of Akhenaten's father, Amenhotep, I said this before, we'll read it again, seemed to signal a new era of even greater peace and prosperity, which, even if it didn't match the unique achievements of the Great Pyramid, would see the construction of the most magnificent temples of the ancient world. After the birth of the three daughters of the Queen Tia, gave Amenhotep a son, perhaps because he had been long awaited, perhaps partly because it was clear that his father did not have long to live. The boy who was to become Akhenaten, brought up in the temple. Sorry, I'm mixing my words up here. Because his father didn't have long to live, the boy who was to become Akhenaten was brought up inside the temple precincts and grew up with a sense of cosmic mission. Akhenaten had been born with a chromosomal defect that gave him a strange, hermaphroditic, even unearthly appearance. Womanly thighs and an elongated face that might be read as ethereal or even spiritual. This defect can also lead to symptoms of mental instability, mania, delusions, and paranoia.
It's Akhenaten.
So this is Akhenaten, the son of Amenhotep. Some combination of these factors may have contributed to his actions, which threatened to disrupt the whole progress of human evolution. Unlike in Babylon, where kings acted independently of the priesthood, leading to extremes of despotic cruelty, the pharaohs of Egypt ruled under the aegis of the initiate priests. This is why the popular view of Akhenaten's revolution that sees it as an act of radical individualism is quite wrong. The start of Akhenaten's reign coincided with the beginning of a Sothic cycle, which is one of the greatest of the astronomical cycles that shaped history. According to the priestly theology, the Sothic cycle is 1460 years long. In Egyptian mythology, each new beginning of this cycle saw the return of the Bennu bird, the phoenix heralding the birth of the new age and a new dispensation. When Akhenaten announced that the closing of the most significant temple in the world of Karnak and the founding of a new cult center and capital approximately halfway between Karnak and Giza, this was not a willful act of an eccentric individual, but an initiate king acting out the cosmic destiny. He was preparing to welcome the return of the Bennu bird in 1321. So yeah, I mean, imagine being ruled by somebody who has access to information that you don't, and it's been 1460 years since the last of this, but he's like changing the entire structure of your, civilization.
Yeah.
Based on this
information
cycle
that you don't have access to.
Yeah. And he looks different. He acts different. He has a different, dispensation or just view of the world and everything. So Akhenaten's new temple was its centerpiece, an obelisk topped by the Benben stone on which the legendary phoenix was to alight. His next act, supported by his mother Queen Tia, was to build his great new capital city and sail the whole machinery of government down to it on barges. He wanted to shift the earth on its axis. He then declared that all other gods did not really exist and that Aten was the one true and only God. This was monotheism in something very like the modern sense. The worship of Isis, Osiris, and Amun-Re was forbidden. Their temples were effaced and shut down, and their popular festivals declared superstitions. There is something appealing to modern sensibility about Akhenaten's reforms. Like today's monotheism, Akhenaten's was materialistic. By definition, monotheism does away with other gods, and it tends to do away with other spirits and other forms of disembodied intelligence too. So monotheism tends to be materialistic in the sense that it tends to deny the experience of spirits. And that experience, as we have already said, is what spirituality really is.
Mm.
So yeah, he's changing the whole function of his society for this, purpose.
And then right after he dies, I believe the next pharaoh sets it right back.
Yeah, basically.
It's interesting too. I've been looking into the ancient Greek stuff as I'm reading Immortality Key and prep to cover it for the podcast. And it was the next emperor after was it Constantine, right? Who made Christianity the official religion. Or no, was that it? Anyway, the emperor right after him was actually he didn't like it, and he was trying to restore paganism.
Oh, really?
To the Roman Empire, but
it was too rooted.
No, he died in battle. He was only emperor for 2 years.
Oh wow!
Yeah, but his goal was to get the Roman Empire back to paganism, and then he died before he could make it happen, and then no one else tried to do that.
Go back.
And Christianity was the official religion from then on.
Imagine.
Yeah, so it's almost like he was like trying to, take a page out of, from Egypt, and they're like, let's not do this. But he wasn't able to reverse it, whereas Egypt was.
That whole time, Egypt and Greece and all of those like old civilizations are so fascinating. All the things that happened, how similar those things were to us, but so different at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, you see these, These are statues of Akhenaten. You see he definitely has a strange look to him.
Elongated face. He's got a womanly figure.
Is he
Eyes.
he's a long head, dude. He's an alien. Long head.
Yeah. And he's holding an alien.
Dude, what the heck?
This is the image I've seen before.
Yeah.
In Ancient Aliens, probably. Or somebody talking about Ancient Aliens.
That's crazy.
Yeah, we'll put that in the video version. Cool, yeah, that's basically it for chapter 12. I think it's pretty...
So I think we're going to cut the show a little short this week, and that is because I have to hop on a plane at 6 a.m.
Yeah.
And right now it's 11 o'clock p.m.
Yeah.
And we normally, if we go full length, end the show after midnight. And
yeah, usually because we'll take another break. And
yeah. But I would like to have a little bit of sleep if
Yeah.
possible. So we
At least a few
will
hours.
be back with more after I get back from Atlanta.
Yeah, this will actually come out after you get back from Atlanta.
It will, yeah.
Yeah.
And then we'll be
Right back on it.
Yep. So
All right, y'all.
cool.
Appreciate
Thanks
ya.
for spending time with us today. Let us know if anything we talked about today sparked your
Struck a chord.
yeah. What are your thoughts on the Moses story and were the Ten
His
Commandments
interpretation
actually stolen from Egypt?
Or at least inspired by Egypt.
For sure. Yeah, I wonder. I'd be interested to read the full context of those from the Book of the Dead and see like how well they
how
match.
similar.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they seem pretty...
Sounds like at least 3 of them are pretty dead on.
It also could be just great minds think alike. But
sure.
if there is evidence showing that he was there
I mean,
and learned from them, I don't know.
some
It's
of
just
the wording
timing.
he used in there was real similar, so I wonder if that's actually how it's worded in the Book of the Dead.
Right, that would be good to know.
Talking about bearing false witness as
Right.
maybe that was just like
It
a
could be
way of
translation
speaking
thing.
back then, but that's obviously modern speech. We wouldn't describe lying in that way. We have a word
Right.
for it.
Yeah, we don't need to dance around it.
Yeah.
Cool.
Anyway,
All right.
cool. We'll see
y'all
you
next
guys
time.
next time. Adios.
Peace.